I don't know, like one example would be in accounting, a negative example. For example, in the UK, we would submit, if you register a new company, you don't have to submit taxes for the first 18 months, and you only have to do it once per year anyway after that. Um, so you just have to keep your receipts, invoices, income, outgoing, and so on, and then you just submit that and you pay the amount of tax that you would owe. In Georgia, they ask you to do it every single month, and for a new company, I think it's a really, I don't know, I think it's very short-term thinking because only, yes, okay, they get their money a little bit quicker, but it puts a lot of pressure on the startup, which is going to have so many expenses anyway in the first month getting up and running. I think it'd be much, much smarter to do something similar to what the UK are doing, where you give the company a bit of breathing space, at least for 12 months, rather than, for, like, we pay our accountants about $300 here on like a small company for them to just submit these returns every month. It's $3,600 per year, and that's not even including the taxes that you have to pay and think about. It's just they should give companies a little bit more breathing space to get up and running, and then after a year, after 18 months, and you shouldn't be required to do it every single month, in my opinion. It may help with cash flow for the government, but I really think it's quite short-sighted. I think they would see a lot more success and a lot more startups growing if there was more breathing space on that side of things. Um, I don't really want to get like too political. Number one, like I'm far from an expert on Georgian politics. I can literally just discuss what I see around me. There are protests. I would say there will be multiple protests per year. There will be about 3 or 4 protests per year. They have reached like international news at points, often to do with gay rights and things like that. There's a real sort of shift going on between the younger generation and like the older generation, or what I think are like a lot of people that are not in the city centre, right? They're sort of from villages or various remote regions from like outside of the city. The city generally, I think, is very, very open-minded, particularly with like the younger generation. But then you will have like these people who have more of like a fixed mindset, who they're not happy. For example, there was like a sex shop that opened and people were throwing bricks at it. I think it was a gay rights protest, and then there were a load of protesters who came and they were burning like gay flags and so on. So it's it's going through like a shift basically, and but I don't want that to. It's sort of a small percentage that are putting a bad. Because when it reaches international news, I think that's what people will think Georgia is like, and I promise you, it's not at all. That is like a tiny percentage of people living here who sort of, in my opinion, have views like that, and it causes like a bad look for the whole country. I think Georgia could do a better job of dealing with it, but again, I'm not an expert on it. It's just my opinions. Then there are also like just some almost like laughable decisions where, they had like this main road, one of the main roads through the center of the city, and they decided to build the bus stops in the middle of the road, so people have to cross a double carriage, like dual lanes on each side. There's 4 lanes in total, and in the middle of 2 lanes there's a bus stop, and then on the other side there's 2 other lanes, which just doesn't make any like sense to me at all. It meant that they have to put traffic lights all the way along this main road, so now it's just like there's no movement of like traffic at all. It's completely ridiculous. And to make matters even worse, if you think of a bus, how it opens, because they put it in the center of the road, the buses actually have to drive the wrong way down the road. So you have cars going one way, a bus going in an opposite direction on that side, and then the same on the opposite side of the road. So it's just completely ludicrous, and it just makes you question how some of these things get approved. Again, it's a developing country. I'm completely fine with it. It doesn't affect me so much, but there are just some funny things that you see going on. Some questionable decisions, let's say, particularly as the reason for doing this was to reduce pollution and promote the use of public transport. For one, COVID had just started, and I don't think it's the best idea to be promoting people to be crammed on in these buses, which, like they are, is a sort of city like that. The buses are absolutely packed, and I don't think it's a good idea to encourage that. And number two, by causing people to sit in so much traffic for so long, because the buses only come along every few minutes, and then there's these other lanes that are just completely full of traffic the whole time. I think they probably increased pollution as a whole. Anyway, not my area of expertise, just as a funny story for you, some funny decision making going on. The other thing that you will have to accept if you did decide to live here is customer service is atrocious. It is unbelievably bad, regardless of if you're in a 5-star hotel. In fact, I would argue that some of them are even worse. It's just not what their forte is, which I always found quite surprising, because as people, they are so hospitable. They're some of the nicest people ever. I personally think it's because wages are so low here that people just generally don't really care about their job. So a waiter or waitress isn't that motivated to work, which I guess leads me on to my next point of salaries and how much does it cost to live in Georgia. So salaries, an average salary here is about $400 for just like average skilled work. People do earn higher than that. I think the Prime Minister's salary is about $1,500 per month, and then if someone's working in like a shop, for example, I was told that on an overnight shift in like a major supermarket, they would earn about $180 per month. There's no minimum wage here as well, and people working in like the factories and so on outside of the city centre, I've been told they can earn as little as like $80 or $150 per month, which is actually cheaper than China. The cost of labour in Georgia, it is cheaper than China in a lot of places. And the cost of living in Georgia, that's really down to you. There's two sort of main areas, like Vera and Vacay, which are like, Vera is quite cool area, a lot of bars, little restaurants, cafes, so on, things like this, and then Vacay is a little bit more, let's call it posh, but developing country posh, nothing like London or Mayfair or anything like that. But it's considered like a high class place to live. It's more expensive. You can get an apartment there for $400 to $600 per month, with like 1 or 2 bedrooms. And of course you can spend much more if you want to, but you would get like a comfortable place for that. In terms of eating, it's really very cheap to eat out. I've barely cooked a meal, and I mean I've cooked under 10 meals in the last 3 years that I've lived here, because it's so cheap to just order food and have it delivered, which is also part of the reason I put on weight since I've been out here. Just the hassle of having to go to the shop, cook the food, clean up after, and the time involved in doing it, when the cost of doing it is almost the same if you just order the food in. It's really quite, for about $1,000 per month you could have a good life, and I mean a good life in Georgia. If you've got $2,000 or $3,000 of disposable income, you can literally do whatever you want. You'll be living like a king here. The one thing that I will say though is there's a limit to the quality of life that you can have. So when I say a good life, I mean you can eat in like there's a restaurant here which is top 50 in the world. There's another one which I think is meant to be top 10 in the world. Not quite sure about if it should be, but and they're really quite cheap. So you can have a very good quality of life here. But if you're talking like Michelin star restaurants, luxury London style living, for example, something like that, you cannot purchase it here. It is not physically not available to buy. Even in the best hotels here, the service is nowhere near like a 5-star hotel that you would. Even in like Turkey, for example, which is a neighbouring country, they really have like fantastic service, but it just does not exist in Georgia. And trust me, I've stayed everywhere.